So that's water under the bridge now between
totally.
you
As far as I'm concerned, look, he endorsed me. He endorsed me, and we have policies very similar. Actually, I want strong borders. He wanted strong borders. I want low taxes. I gave you the largest tax cut in history. Nobody ever bigger than the Ronald Reagan tax cut. He wants that. I want a strong military. He wants that. He doesn't want wars, although I may be a little bit even more so in that. Not wanting wars. We have wars in places that nobody ever heard of before. And a lot of the things that he wanted, I wanted. And I think, in fact, I noticed people commentary, they're saying, well, all of those people that would be for him would be for Trump. Mm-hmm. And so I was honored that he endorsed me this quickly. I mean, it's not easy. Look, it's not easy. He fought hard.
Okay.
He just said, will I be using the name Ron DeSanctinominous? I said, that name is officially retired.
All right, folks. Well, obviously, yesterday we covered the somewhat unexpected news, at least in terms of the timing, but still, I would argue, welcome news that Ron DeSantis dropped out of the presidential race and officially and immediately endorsed Donald Trump. Well, today I want to talk about some of Trump's reaction and response to all of that, because as I've made the case now, basically since the Iowa caucus, it's time for everyone to come together. It's time for everyone who agrees on most of the America First issues, which I would argue, while they may have had a falling out, while we may have some practical or strategic disagreements, ultimately, ideologically, Trump, DeSantis, and most of their supporters agree on 90% of issues. And considering how the primary has gone, it's basically decided at this point, there is no point in fighting each other. Ultimately, we have an election in November that we have to mutually win. And I did compliment DeSantis saying, I thought the way he dropped out was pretty classy. But more importantly than that, I think he still ultimately has certain strengths that he can offer the conservative movement, right? Because he's an effective executor. He's good at getting things done. He's good at being fed a vision and then turning that vision into action and policy. And so these are all compliments I gave to DeSantis. And this is why I think in many ways it is so important, not just for electoral reasons, obviously, but also the political reasons going into the future that Trump and DeSantis ultimately reconcile. And I surely hope the supporters of both candidates can reconcile. I mean, you certainly see some terminally online people on Twitter/X that are just bitter and fuming about it. But I think realistically, for the most part, most DeSantis supporters will be able to come over to Trump, and I think they will be welcomed in the real world. Maybe not on the internet, but in the real world. But anyways, so Trump, again, we're going to talk about some of his reaction to that here today. He did an interview with Lawrence Jones where, Lawrence kind of asked him about this stuff. And let's see what he has to say in response to Ron DeSantis. Here you go.
Well, I endorsed him. I didn't know him as well as you might think, but I did endorse him. And I had some fun with it because I watched somebody who was not in the race, and all of a sudden he was in the race. And then he did a good job as governor. Mm-hmm. So I was happy with that. But I was disappointed when they asked him whether or not he'd run. And he said, I have no comment. Because to me, when you say no comment, that means you're running. Mm-hmm. And we took it, I think I took it quite seriously. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't matter now because he got out.
So that's water under the bridge now between
totally.
you.
As far as I'm concerned, look, he endorsed me. He endorsed me. And we have policies very similar, actually. I think those people will all come to me.
Is there a possibility, since you say it's water under the bridge, he can be vice president or serve in your cabinet? He hasn't asked for any of those positions,
no,
I don't think yet.
No,
but is there a possible of the joining of forces?
Well, it's probably unlikely, but, I have to be honest, everything's a possibility, but I think it's highly unlikely. I have a lot of great people, and I have great people that have been with me right from the beginning.
What is your message to someone that would have voted for Ron DeSantis or supported them? What do you tell them now that he's endorsed you?
Well, I think it just, it sort of magnifies, if I can say that, because he and I had look, I want strong borders. He wanted strong borders. I want low taxes. I gave you the largest tax cut in history. Nobody ever, bigger than the Ronald Reagan tax cut. He wants that. I want a strong military. He wants that. He doesn't want wars, although I may be a little bit even more so in that not wanting wars. We have wars in places that nobody ever heard of before, and we're losing. You talk about blood and wealth. We lose so stupidly. And a lot of the things that he wanted, I wanted. And I think,
that's true.
In fact, I noticed people commentary, they're saying, well, all of those people that would be for him would be for Trump. Mm-hmm. And so I was honored that he endorsed me this quickly. I mean, it's not easy. Look, it's not easy. He fought hard, spent a lot of money, and a lot of people thought he'd do well. You know, I was leading from the beginning, just so you understand. And I did very well in Florida, more votes than anybody ever got. I got more votes in Florida than anybody ever got. But he was doing well. And I think he did the right thing. I don't, you know, look, I can talk about somebody else's campaign. I didn't see a path. I don't see a path for her at all.
So there you have it. A lot of different things to break down there. But first, let's talk about the practical argument he makes to DeSantis voters that I've been making too, which is, look, we agree on all these issues. If you look at the actual campaign platforms of Trump and DeSantis, there might be some slight differences, but they're more or less the same thing, right? You know, there's a reason why the original argument almost for DeSantis was like, he's Trumpism without Trump, or he's Trump without the baggage or the crazy personality or whatever it is. And like I said, you know, I didn't necessarily subscribe to those arguments, but I understand why people would have wanted DeSantis over Trump. I get it, because they see DeSantis as hey, he has all of the policies of Trump, but he might be more effective. This is what their argument. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I get it. I see where they're coming from. If you look at what he did in Florida, he might be more effective at getting those things implemented, you know, building the wall, fixing immigration, you know, this or that, right? Okay, fair enough. Okay. But ultimately, when we look at how the primary has gone, you know, you guys made your case. You guys tried. Good for you. But it didn't work out, right? So the choice that DeSantis supporters have to make now is, do I enable or try to enable, talking to some of those Twitter people, right? Do I try to enable 4 more years of Biden, or do I get behind a guy that, hey, maybe there was some personal beef there, maybe there was some, you know, animosity, or you feel like he wasn't effective enough, fair enough, whatever, but we agree on all the same things. So do we get behind that, or do we get behind Nikki Haley, who is the total contrast of everything we want? Even Ron DeSantis has said that himself. That's a big reason why he endorsed Trump over Haley, besides the fact it's probably the practical thing to do. But I do think there are some principled, reasons there as well, right? Do we do that? And do we, if you're a DeSantis supporter, at least hope that he's as effective as we want him to be? Which, you know, that's something I hope as well. Or do we just be like screaming children about this, right? Because you look at what Trump and DeSantis did ultimately, let me say it this way, you know, props to both of them. They handled it like men. You know, they had this difference. They were competing against each other. They went after each other. But when it's all over, it's like, all right, we're on the same side. Let's be mature about this. We have a mutual enemy, and it is what it is. So I think, you know, that's a case I've been trying to make to these DeSantis people. 100% agree. We agree on 90% of the stuff, maybe even more than that. It is petty, it is childish, it is all sorts of names to still, after the primaries over, being divided over that because we don't like each other's personality, or Laura Loomer was mean to me on Twitter. It's like, guys, big picture here. Okay, politics is not just internet content, it's not just personal stuff. It affects the country, it affects real people. Let's all be mature about this. I thought that was a great message from Trump. It's something I subscribe to. Clearly, it's something that Ron DeSantis, props to him, personally also subscribes to. So I hope that all the DeSantis voters out there come home. And truthfully, you know, outside of that Twitter cult that I keep referring to and we've talked about before, I think most real Ron DeSantis supporters get that. I think they really do. You know, I know some of them are even in my family. You know, they're like, I'll vote for either, but I kind of wanted DeSantis more, but it's fine. You know, and look, it's all good. It really is. Okay. But that was message number one. Number two, though, I thought was interesting, where he was asked if DeSantis would be the VP or have a future cabinet position. He said it was unlikely, which I thought was interesting. I mean, in fairness, I didn't think DeSantis was ever going to be the VP because, you know, putting aside the fact that maybe that primary, they still have a little bit of trust to rebuild, even if they're being mature about this and they're coming together. Yeah, I'm sure there's still a little bit that they got to iron out. But even bigger than that, you know, they're both from the same state, right? So I think there's technically a loophole where Trump could reclassify his residency to Nevada or back to New York or something. But the Constitution does say you can't have a president and VP from the same state. And if you do, the electoral votes there are voided. So they're not going to do that. Obviously, they don't want to lose the electoral votes of Florida. So that made sense to me. You know, as for the cabinet, I will say, and I've said this, I would like to see Ron DeSantis get a position in the cabinet. However, there's also a case to be made that, you know, he has 2 more years as governor after this. And assuming Trump wins, for instance, you know, in 2024, you know, maybe you make a case, hey, let it heal a little bit. Time certainly heals all wounds. I think that's very true, especially true in this country, right? You know, let DeSantis finish out his term as governor, get the last few things he wanted to get done. For one, me personally, I certainly hope that he fixes the insurance rates in this state because they are ridiculous. So maybe, you know, fix the insurance crisis, solidify the conservative stronghold that is the state of Florida. Then maybe halfway through the Trump term, once DeSantis is out of a job, once he's, you know, out as governor, maybe you come in at the end, maybe do something, or heck, even knows, maybe he just wants to start the 2028 campaign by then. I don't know. I really have no idea, but that's interesting. Okay. But like I said, I would like to see DeSantis get a role, not VP. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think it's just practical when you consider the state thing. But like I've said, I think DeSantis is very good with policy. He's very good at getting things done. We know that. I would like to see him get a position. Like I said yesterday, I think you could form a strong triumvirate, right? Where you have Vivek Ramaswamy, New Year's resolution. Vivek Ramaswamy, who is the visionary. You know, he's the guy with the ideas. He's the guy with the dream. Trump needs that. Trump needs someone who reminds him, hey, this is what the movement is about. This is what we are about. Let's look into the future, right? But on the other side, you also need the executor. You have the dreamer and you have the doer. You actually need both, contrary to what people might think, okay? DeSantis, he may not be the visionary, okay? And I think that's true. When you look at a lot of his campaign and the shortcomings of it, arguably, is that he had a hard time selling the vision. But his idea, the things he wanted to get done were good, right? So if you have Vivek feed the vision, okay, and then DeSantis turn that vision into action, that can be a very powerful trio, all behind the leader, obviously, Donald Trump, in the middle of it. So I do think the Trump cabinet could use Ron DeSantis. Do they, quote unquote, need Ron DeSantis? I don't know. It's something I would like to see happen. But at the same time, I also get the arguments that, hey, you know, there's still a little bit of awkwardness after this primary. Can you really fully trust each other? That's for them to work out. That's not for me to make the decision there. Or the argument, maybe Ron just wants to finish out as governor. I get that too. As a Florida resident, I wouldn't mind that either. But anyways, that's this interview here. Got a couple more clips here to talk about, folks. I want to talk about some of the stuff he said publicly in the rallies and stuff. So here's one clip. Here's him talking about Ron and Casey DeSantis right after this happened. This was his rally yesterday, Sunday night. So take a listen here.
Before we begin, I'd like to take time to congratulate Ron DeSantis and, of course, a really terrific person who I've gotten to know, his wife, Casey, for having run a great campaign for president. He did. He ran a really good campaign, I will tell you. It's not easy. They think it's easy doing this stuff, right? It's not easy. But as you know, he left the campaign trail today at 3 p.m., and in so doing, he was very gracious, and he endorsed me, so I appreciate it. I appreciate that, and I also look forward to working with Ron and everybody else to defeat crooked Joe Biden. We will have to get him out. We have to get him out.
I agree.
He's put our country at great peril, great peril. So I just want to thank Ron and congratulate him on doing a very good job. It's a tough situation. It's a tough thing to do. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, you know, nothing special, but I think you hear the way that the crowd reacts. I mean, truly, a lot of us still like the guy. I do like the guy. I've said that. Like, I never saw the guy as some enemy or like deep state neocon plant. And I don't get me wrong, I do think a lot of the people who inspired his campaign and tried to get him to run. I think in many ways he was sort of manipulated by bad people. But I think when you saw how classy he was when he dropped out, the fact that he was mature enough to immediately get behind Donald Trump, and the fact, I mean, listen to that crowd. I mean, they clearly still like the guy. They're cheering the guy. We don't want to be at war. Okay, we don't, because we have so many bigger enemies than Trump or DeSantis just in the GOP alone. I mean, think about your Nikki Haley's, think about your Chris Christie's, think about your Liz Cheney's, people like that. So, this is good. Okay, last thing I want to react to, and then I got one more kind of topic of discussion to bring up here in regards to Ron DeSantis, but this is just kind of a wholesome clip. Here is President Trump announcing he is retiring the nickname Ron DeSanctinominous, which, let me say, initially I wasn't even a fan of that nickname, although as time went on, it started to get kind of funny. But good news, guys, it's retired. It's retired. Okay, take a listen to this clip.
Okay. He just said, will I be using the name Ron DeSanctinominous? I said, that name is officially retired.
Okay, so again, like I said, between the two, is there probably some private awkwardness still a little bit? Sure, that's understandable. But they've squashed it, okay? So I think the choice now for the DeSantis voters is, are you going to squash it? Because if you're really behind DeSantis and he's saying, vote for Trump, we don't want Nikki Haley, we don't want Joe Biden, you have a decision to make. I think everyone does. I encourage you to make the right decision. With that said, like I said, I got one more thing I want to discuss here because I was going to kind of touch on it in yesterday's video and then I sort of forgot. So let's just bring it up here today, which is, what is the political future of Ron DeSantis? This is interesting. Not super related to all of this, but I find it interesting. And because a lot of people said that, the moment he announced this primary and failed, his political career is over. He's never coming back again. I look at that and honestly, I disagree. Right? I think that he's still a young guy. And I think a thing people forget is how much time heals wounds, especially in America. Right? This is the land of comebacks. Like, frankly, Patrick Bet-David says it all the time. There's nothing the American people love more than a comeback. They like to see the fall, but they like to see the comeback even more. But I guess the interesting, so I think, he's obviously going to term out as governor, whether it's a position in the Trump White House, maybe he runs for senator of Florida after he's governor. I don't know. He's still young. I think he has a bright future on that front. I think he'll be just fine. Okay. Years from now, no one's going to remember him as the guy who betrayed Donald Trump. Everyone's going to remember him as the guy who was the good governor, tried to run for president. It didn't work the first time, whatever, right? I think that's his legacy more so than being this traitor. I don't think he's a Chris Christie. I don't think he's really any of those characters, right? And you saw how Ted Cruz rebounded. You saw how Marco Rubio miraculously rebounded. I think he'll be fine on that front. The question, though, I think this is more interesting to me, is does he have a shot at ever being president in the future? And I'll tell you how I feel about it, right? My gut instinct says no. That's my gut instinct. But I'll also tell you the counter argument that I also find very strong. My gut instinct says no, not because he quote unquote betrayed Trump. Because I think that people, like I said, people will forget about that. They really will. That's the truth. Maybe you won't, but a lot of people will. A lot of people will get over it, okay? But I look at him for the most part and say, I don't know if he has the it factor to ever win a presidential campaign, right? You just kind of look at, and you felt it on this campaign trail. There was just something missing, right? I think Vivek Ramaswamy had that it factor, that ability to inspire. You can call it charisma. You can call it whatever you want. DeSantis just didn't really seem to have it, okay? And so that again, that's why my gut instinct says, even in the future, I don't know if he'll be able to pull that off. However, there's a strong counter argument to be made, which is that, like I said, America is the land of comebacks. And honestly, I know that a lot of people compare Trump and Richard Nixon because of the persecution aspect, and I think that's a strong comparison. But in many ways, I actually think Ron DeSantis is very similar to Richard Nixon. Why do I say that? Because they were both popular governors. And then, obviously it's a slightly different story. Richard Nixon was Eisenhower's VP and all of that. But I think the story for the most part is the same. Richard Nixon, what did he do? He lost the election very narrowly in 1960, okay, to JFK. Now, there are questions historically about what really happened in that election, but I'm not even going to entertain them. It's really broken down to the most part of, well, JFK had the it factor, right? He was inspiring. He was charismatic. Nixon was said to have sort of lacked it. I think in many ways, him and DeSantis actually have similar personalities, in the sense that they're both sort of bulldogs. They both sort of are good and they like to get stuff done. But in terms of the cameras, in terms of quote unquote charisma, it's not really there so much, right? They're not sort of these revolutionaries or visionaries, at least on a personality viewpoint. But we all know the story of Richard Nixon. Before Watergate, obviously, which is 1960, he lost. 1962, he announces, this is my last press conference, never coming back. We're never doing it again. Everyone said his career was over. And then, of course, what happened in 68? What happened in 68 is an American story as old as time, which is he made a comeback, right? So this is to say, I don't know if Ron DeSantis will make a comeback in terms of the presidential aspect of things. Again, I have absolutely no idea. I really don't even have a stance on it, right? That's just sort of my objective analysis, which is, on one hand, I don't know if he has the it factor. On the other hand, they said the same thing about Richard Nixon. He lost the first time. Everyone said it was over for him. And then look what happened next. So I have no idea. Again, it's not super related to the Trump-DeSantis thing, but it's just an interesting question. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it, because I'm actually kind of conflicted on that, right? I don't know what the future looks like for him, whether it's 2028 or 2032 even. Who the heck knows? Who the heck knows? But again, it's just interesting to think about. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section down below. And of course, be sure to let me know your thoughts on, Trump DeSantis. If you're a DeSantis supporter, will you now be getting behind Trump? Or do I still have to do a million more videos convincing you of why you should unite? Who knows? But let me know. Be sure to leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, Alpha Moves Only. God bless. Have a very good day and peace.